This episode is brought to you by White Claw Surge. Great podcast pick, friend. No surprises there. After all, you're all about finding the tastiest flavors out there, just like White Claw Surge. And with big, bold flavors to enjoy, like blood orange, blackberry, cranberry, and more, it's time to go all in on taste. Unleash the flavor. Unleash White Claw Surge. Please drink responsibly. Hard seltzer with flavors. 8% alcohol by volume. White Claw Seltzer Works. Chicago, Illinois.
Let's hang out. And let's talk about what Lez is about. And let's listen to two lesbians shout. Let's hang out.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Lez Hang Out, the podcast where let's get loud. Let's get loud. A little J-Lo to get us in the mood. From the West Coast, I'm Leigh Holmes Foster. To those of you who've been with us through this whole journey, thank you as always for listening. If you're a new listener, welcome. We are excited to have you here. Here's what's happening this week.
This week in the Lesdom.
This Week in the Lesdom is a place where we can touch base each episode about things going on with the podcast or otherwise. In season 9, we are releasing more Patreon bonus episodes. We have lots of them on our Patreon. You can listen to that at bit.ly/lespatreon. Our last one was on queer friend group dynamics. And our next one is going to be diving into, how would you say this, Leigh?
A gay discussion on the possible problematicness of queer identities as they relate to other queer identities. I don't know. You'll have to check. You'll have to listen hear more. We're not giving away anything. You think you know what it's about? You don't have a clue. Neither do we.
Amazing. Well, you can listen to that at bit.ly/lespatreon. And in the greater Les universe, The Last of Us recently cast one of the characters that people were really excited about. His name is Lev. And in the video game, they are a trans boy. And they cast a cis girl to play this trans boy. And that
wasn't it.
Is not it. Is not it.
In case you thought that was it, that wasn't it.
It's not it.
And also there were so many comments on some of these things with people being like, well, I mean, where are they going to find someone to cast for that? As though that's an impossible task. And we are here to tell you that's not an impossible task.
No.
No,
at
just
all.
ridiculous.
Yes.
Also in the Greater Lez universe, I need you all to thank me personally. You can, email us at letshangout@gmail.com to send me personally your thanks, because we came on here not that long ago and we're like, wow, Bridgerton, can't believe that you teased us all with this possible gay thing and then didn't go gay at all. And I can't believe it. Like, go gay, Bridgerton. And then what did they do?
They went gay.
They went immediately, let's release a trailer teasing our gay season. So wish me luck, y'all, as I start trying to catch up on 4 seasons of this show to be prepared for a gay season. Will I make it?
No.
Unclear.
You could probably just watch the gay season.
That's what everyone keeps telling me, and that is not my personality, Ellie.
All right, well, then you should start watching.
I'm going to try.
We're going to have to talk about it when it comes out, Leigh.
I'm going to try. I'm going to do my best. I'm not promising anything, but I will try.
I have some faith in you. It's just a lot of episodes. Also, Katarina Scorzoni and ER Fightmaster have confirmed that they are dating in real life, and the two of them had been dating also on TV on Grey's Anatomy. So we love an on-screen to real-life dating. That is some fanfic gold. So thank you, Katarina and ER, for giving that to us. That's what's happening this week. Back to you, Ellie and Leigh.
Thanks, Ellie and Leigh, and we are so excited to bring you episode 16 of season 9. It's Gaze Your Voice. And we are joined by a very special guest today. We have Nicole Gress, who is a speech-language pathologist and the founder of Undead Voice, a voice coaching and transition program dedicated to eradicating voice dysphoria. Nicole, thanks for being here.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I am so excited. I'll say at the top, for our more astute listeners, you may have noticed Ellie is not here. It's just me, and it's just Nicole. And we're going to have a great time because Ellie is so jealous that she could not be here.
We'll do
She was
double
so
the
excited.
energy.
Yeah, we're going to be super, super high. We're actually going to be jogging the whole time we do this. So when we start sounding out of breath, everyone, you just know it's because we're too excited.
Yeah, we're running very fast. 7-minute miles.
You can't see the treadmills. It's a podcast, okay? It's the magic of it. Nicole, tell me about Undead Voice. How did Undead Voice come back to life from the dead?
How did I birth my baby?
Yeah, tell me about that. In graphic detail, please.
Of course. Yeah. So it was naturally born out of the need. I could have gone further with that one.
Do it.
Yeah,
Undead
Voice, we are a trans voice training platform. So completely virtual. We work with all ages, all identities, and we help trans and gender diverse people change the physical sound of their voice to be more affirming or aligned with their identity if that is part of their gender journey. It is not for everybody, but from our data, about 85% of trans people experience voice dysphoria. So having access to some sort of voice training can be extremely important as part of somebody's transition experience. And how did I birth Undead Voice? I worked in the Bay Area, private practice in a hospital, and because I specialize working with adults, there's a great affirming population here of trans and gender diverse folks, like a great community. And at the time, the places I worked took insurance.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of trans people coming to us for voice stuff. No idea what we're doing though, because again, they don't really teach us too much in graduate school or even in voice specific coursework on how to do voice training. So I tried with those methodologies for about 4 years and then decided we can do it a little bit better and a little bit more fun, and let's move it online and actually focus and center it around our community. And I can go into more detail, but essentially from that moment to a year later was a whole ass journey I'm sure we'll get into. But eventually launched Undead Voice Lab, which is
cool.
our voice training platform.
When you got into speech pathology, all this stuff, was this a path that you imagined at all, or did this just sort of happen along the way?
Definitely did not imagine it. I knew I wanted to go into the medical side of speech pathology. Usually either go kind of working with children in schools on how to say your R's. Rabbit instead of wabbit. That's
great.
One
if
half.
You have tips on those, I will take them.
I definitely do. That's how I went to a speech therapist when I was a child, because I could not say my R's at that point.
We are working with my 6-year-old because it's the one little, if you've worked with kids,
yes.
they grow out of so many little babyisms, and it's the one that she still has that part of me is I want to keep it. And then the other part of me is you're in school now and I should fix this. But
there's so many different versions of R. There's 27 different versions of R you can say. I think 6, you're probably still okay. 7, 8. Yeah, look to maybe do a little bit of
I think she's okay. I feel like it's the we started being more active about being hey Audrey,
give it a try.
Let's think about where our tongue is in the back of our mouth to get an R out.
I mean, that's pretty great.
Because
you're doing it.
Yeah, but it makes me a little sad sometimes. But that's okay. Anyway, so fixing R's, and then from there, obviously, naturally, trans people.
For sure. No, that's one half of where people. I mean, I'm being a bit reductive, but essentially, that's one pathway for speech pathologists. The other pathway is more medically focused. So swallowing disorders, head, neck, throat cancer, voice stuff. Like I mentioned, my area of specialty: traumatic brain injury, stroke recovery. For me, it was anything that had to do with the brain and the puzzle of figuring out okay, there's been some change that's happened, whether that is a stroke, an injury, a traumatic brain injury, or any sort of other trauma that happens to this formed adult brain. And then there's just this disparate damage that's different for every person. And then figuring out okay, what specifically happened to you? What areas of your brain are impaired? And then we get to basically we're the people who do the physical therapy for the brain. So we do the rehab. And that requires a few things. It requires one, knowing how an adult brain learns to speak. Because if that's impacted, you have to rebuild it. And then taking this extremely complex concept of voice or speech and language and making it understandable to somebody who is struggling to, communicate. And so that framework actually served me extremely well, because that is the exact framework through which I ended up building the curriculum for the delivery of trans voice training. Because you are not just learning how to sing or learning how to speak another language. We are actually rewriting habits in your brain of how to unconsciously like shift your voice in a way that you don't ever have to think about it again. And it doesn't require any effort. And that's like a really specific approach. It's the same exact approach that I learned in my specialty in going through school. So no, I did not plan on focusing on trans voice. It is not something they actually teach us. A lot of the strategies that they teach us for voice or to use for trans voice through like the curriculum were actually created for people who were like singers or have a sort of vocal injury. They weren't actually created based on how society like codes gender perception into the voice. So they're not really that applicable. So I had to deep dive into, I am not a singer. Well, actually, let me say now I'm a bit of a singer. I am much better than I was 6 years ago.
Own it. Live it.
I had to go through so many like voice singing, pedagogy, voice acting, all these curriculums in order to create our programming and all of the lessons and exercises that like now I have a really great control over my voice, but that was not my background at all. So, we evolve.
I want to comment on a couple things that have happened in the last 2 minutes. One, I like that you're just extremely casually just like, well, first, we just need to understand like how the brain works and like how the brain processes language. Two famously simple topics.
Sure, for sure.
That you just tossed out so casually. Just extremely, extremely nonchalant. So one, we will be coming back around to that because I love it. And two, so I'm curious, like because you got into this whole thing with singing and voice training and all this stuff, and I'm curious because it sounds like you got into that after, like that came after sort of a lot of other things.
For me?
So,
in my journey?
And I'm curious, how was that to like attack that onto the end of stuff, because I feel like for me that would seem like a natural starting place.
Yeah, if it had been presented to me early on and as just even an option of the direction to take, I mean, my exploration of trans voice as an area of focus kind of was a parallel track with my own gender exploration. So I think if I had been introduced to it earlier on, I probably would have explored my own gender identity a lot earlier and also been extremely drawn to it. I can't deny that there's also a part of me that's just like innately entrepreneurial. And so the idea that there's like this unexplored but highly impactful, very much life-changing area of focus that I can not only specialize in, but like make a huge impact and develop the actual training for it was extremely attractive to me. It allows me to be like the most creative and the most independent and have full ownership over not just how my life goes, but also how I can impact people outside of a medical system. Because when I was working within the traditional medical system, there's a lot of restrictions as to like what you can teach, how often you can talk to patients, like what are the different exercises and approaches that you can do. And so being able to like completely 180 flip that 360, 960, I don't know how it's actually 360,
some number of
720. I don't have a snowboarding background. I do not know what those flips are. A huge
How
degree
many
shift.
times are you aiming to circle around?
I mean, at this point, she's been dizzy for a while. Yeah, no, it wasn't expected. What it was like was it felt really natural and faded. It didn't just happen like overnight. It wasn't like, okay, randomly let's switch focus. Basically, the hospital I worked at was known as a center of excellence for trans healthcare. And there was a lot of people who would come in for gender affirming surgeries or procedures. And then those people would often be seen by us because speech pathologists always see people after they're extubated. So if they've had surgery and they've been intubated and then they're extubated, depending on like how long that was or what that experience was like, there can be some, concern about their airway or their swallowing. And so I was encountering a lot of people who were transitioning and were interested in voice, and they were already on my caseload. So they'd start to ask a bunch of questions, and their surgeons would also be like, "Oh, you do voice? We have nobody for trans voice. Can we send people to you?" And so it just became very obvious that there's not only a need for it, but like what we were taught to do wasn't working because people started bringing in YouTube videos. I'm like, okay, we cannot be at this point where people are bringing YouTube videos and saying like, can you try this technique? I love that YouTube exists out there. 95% of trans people start their voice journey on YouTube. It should not be the industry standard that you're following YouTube videos.
Yeah,
and
the same place where, like, you know, you find RFK Jr.
Oh my
videos
gosh. Yeah.
on like how vaccines will kill you.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not like the go-to source of medical knowledge that
Absolutely not.
Sure.
Yeah, and there's like this, I think whenever, you know, it's not a mystery that a lot of trans people experience some sort of trauma or harm in the hands of the medical system. And so being able to create a company outside of the medical system completely, because we are coaching and training. I don't practice under my licensure. That's a wonderful experiment that I did with my life, but it's not really the direction I ended up taking. It gives us a lot of freedom to actually serve people in ways that they need. But then also like just the idea of your doctor gives you a referral to a specialist. You go to that specialist and they teach you everything that they know to teach you. And at the end of it, you still aren't satisfied or it's still not meeting your needs. It doesn't really cross your mind. The only thing that crosses your mind is that you've failed. Like they're telling you, well, we did everything we did. You can do all of that, but you still aren't satisfied or you still don't love the sound of your voice. You think you're a failure. The truth is it's an institutional failure. And, you know, like most medical fields, it takes a while to kind of catch up and do research if you can get that funded. And it's just, I wasn't willing to wait any longer.
Yeah.
So being able to leave that system behind and create one that's really community driven and actually meets our people where they need to be met. I did what most trans and gender diverse people do, which is like figured it out myself and just did community care.
It's the queer way.
The queer way.
What I love about it too, though, is like there's something so interesting about focusing on an aspect that, like, I think you said something about this earlier on when you were just casually, dropping brain stuff around, but it really is like voice stuff is something that we don't learn about usually ever in our lives, like I think for most people, I think obviously anyone who grew up like singing, you usually get some small sense or like some kind of intro education in like basics of our voice and how like voices work and to some extent, but even within that, like unless you're really going into a singing career or like getting trained in it or all of this stuff, it's such for a thing that everybody does every single day. Yeah. That is such a bedrock of like human society and communication and everything. Like we don't teach people about voices. We don't teach people about so many of these things that have often no conscious thought behind them. Right. Yeah. And what you were saying is like, how do you like
make the unconscious conscious? Yeah.
Some of that stuff to get a conscious understanding of it and then put that back into an unconscious space. But it is such an interesting thing to focus on because it's like, in the same way that I think probably most people who do know how to sing these days, like I think everyone kind of understands the concept of like anyone can learn to sing. You can learn to sing. You can learn to sing at any age. You can learn vocal control at any age. It might be harder than it is as an adult than it can be as a kid. But like anybody can learn this stuff. It is a part of your body that we have control over.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? But it's so interesting how little we learn about it and how little conscious training we're actually ever given in it. Yeah. But it's also something that is so important and so socially loaded, I think, for everyone, not just for trans people, but especially for trans people, of course. So I'm curious, like, tell me a little bit about what the focus is like when you're working with trans people, when you're working on like that sort of dysphoria around it. Like, where does that usually start, and how do you start approaching like helping with that?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and there's a lot of different layers here. I do want to touch on like one thing you mentioned and then go back to answering this, which is this idea of like we don't really think about our voice, even though it is the thing that we use the most if we're somebody who speaks in the world, to connect with people, how we're perceived often by our voice. It's one of the, the most intrinsic, like you always know the sound of the voice of the people that you love and kind of pick it out of a lineup, right? Or a crowd, if you will. But often the times when we think about our voice the most, if we're not experiencing voice dysphoria, is when we hear it recorded, right? So
Mhm.
a lot of people, that's a very universal experience that I usually start with when I'm doing like an allyship training is, well, you know, when you hear yourself recorded, do you ever have that like ick or that cringe moment where you're like, there's no way I sound like that? I do not
Hey, you
identify
know
with
what's
that
great for that?
sound.
Do a podcast for
Yep.
a decade. It's really
It sure
good.
is. Yep.
It's exposure therapy.
Yeah, it kind of rewires your brain to find a middle ground between what you hear in your head and what you hear played back to you. But for the majority of people who don't have successful 10-year podcasts, that is
Yeah,
not
who aren't
their
forced to listen to themselves at,
exactly.
gunpoint for
Yeah,
a year, a couple of years. Yeah.
that and what you mentioned about singing, where like even if that is more consistent focus on the voice, it's still acute, right? It's still like a moment in time. It's not constant every time you speak. And so for trans and gender diverse people who experience voice dysphoria, when you open your mouth to speak every single time, there could be this level of discomfort and
Mhm.
pain, frustration, trauma that can lead to a lot of like isolation, etc. Just kind of detaching from the world or feeling self-conscious or uncomfortable every time you have to interact, period, no matter who it is with. And so that's a really big, great distinction to kind of draw is this, you know, you can tap into empathy of that feeling of having a dysphoria moment or discomfort with hearing the sound of your voice, but then try to extrapolate or project it to every single time you speak. What would that be like to have that, your emotional bandwidth so taken up by that experience that it becomes exhaustive and overwhelming. And so the experience of being able to reclaim agency over your voice and actually enjoy the way that it sounds and choose how it presents and make that just a natural part of your everyday life, that your voice now sounds in a way that you love, is monumentally impactful, not only on the mental health of a trans or gender diverse person who's transitioned their voice, but also on their ability to interact socially, their personal life, professional life, their community. There's like a blossoming that happens. It's this like realization. It might be the voice, but it kind of trickles into all parts of your identity. It's like I get to now be comfortable in a way that I never have been. Because, you know, for a lot of trans and gender diverse people, you grow up having to be influenced societally or culturally by the world in which you live, or the being socialized by the gender you're assigned at birth. And there's expectations, especially around
Mhm.
voice, about what that means. And you don't really get the chance to shape your own voice. And then in adulthood, or at whatever point you start transitioning your voice, being able to not just choose what it is going forward, but also look reflectively of like what makes me sound like me, and do I actually identify with those influences, or do I want to leave them behind? So that's like a beautiful part of the journey that I don't think many people talk about, this like choice, if you will.
Mhm.
But the actual experience I can dive into of like, what does that process actually look like?
Do it. Do it.
Okay.
Let's dive in.
Okay, we'll get nerdy for a second. So
I love it.
you have 3 influences on the voice. They are environmental, cultural, and physical. So environmentally, like the environment that you are raised in, like geographically, can influence the way you sound, which is why somebody from the UK sounds different than somebody from New Jersey or Southern
Mhm.
California, right? There's these like geographical influences on the voice. Culturally, the culture that you're raised around can influence the way that you sound, can also influence like how close you stand to somebody when you speak, the rate of your speech, the words that you use, how much eye contact you make. There's these other nonverbal parts of speech that are heavily influenced by the culture that you're part of. And then the third one is physical. So like the size and shape of our body does impact the way that we sound, especially as somebody goes through adolescent puberty. A lot of those changes happen because the instrument of your voice grows as the rest of your body does as well. And, you know, that the physical voice, though it's heavily influenced by the size and shape of your body, is manipulable to a huge degree, right?
Yeah.
And so those are the 3 influences on the voice. They're geographical, cultural, and physical. Now, most voice training takes what we call like an imitation approach. So you probably have experienced this. It sounds like you've done some voice training in your life, some singing a little bit.
I have done very, very minimal. If only Ellie was here, who I'm
Okay.
sure has done just so
Ellie
much
from
more
afar,
vocal
this
training
is
than I
probably
have.
something you're
Yeah.
familiar with. Yeah, a lot of times we use what's called an imitation approach, which is where like your voice coach will make a sound and then you imitate it back, right?
Yeah.
And that's how you're learning. It's like demonstrating and then repeating. Now, what happens with voice transition, though, is that when you imitate somebody else's voice, you don't just imitate their sound, you're also taking on the cultural and the environmental influences of their voice. It's like stepping into somebody's vocal identity. And that is a huge problem whenever we're not trying to erase somebody's identity, right? We still want them to sound like them, just in a more affirming part of their range. So what we do at Undead Voice is we take a physical only approach. So we leave the environmental and the cultural parts of a voice untouched, and we only teach people how to shift and control the size and shape of their vocal instrument, which allows them to play the same song they've always played, but in a different range or a different genre, if you will, than they were before. So they still retain who they are, and we're not eroding their personhood or their personality, which is extremely important. Now, the way that you do that is by focusing on 5 pillars of voice. So there's 5 specific areas that we have created or as part of our curriculum. And they are vocal weight, vocal tilt, resonance, pitch, and dynamics. When you learn to control all 5 areas, the tilt, weight, resonance, pitch, and dynamics, you gain full control over your range and end up with like a soundboard of different knobs and sliders that you get to play around with and combine and find whatever combination is most affirming for your unique identity and yourself. And so it's not like, oh, I'm doing voice training and I can only choose from this or that ends of the spectrum. We purposely don't use any gendered language in voice. We're not feminizing or masculinizing a voice. We're giving people full control over their instrument so they can choose where on their own vocal spectrum that sound feels most affirming. And we don't use any gendered language intentionally because voices themselves do not have gender. Humans do. Humans do.
It's a construct, y'all.
It is. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. And so, I mean, for fun, I can show you some stuff with my voice, but also I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole because who knows? This feels a little bit more like a CAS conversation.
No, I mean, we can for sure make you do party tricks at some point. I think what's fascinating to me, and it's like, this is actually like such good timing to be doing this because, I have 2 young
babies.
Children, my babies. And what's been really funny for me lately is, I don't know how much you're up on like what all the kids are into these days, but let me tell you what it is. It is a book series that's called Wings of Fire, and they're about dragons. And I promise this is all going to loop back around.
Around to your 4th wing obsession? Okay.
We're all getting it. All comes back to that. But no, so what's happening is the book series as they're written are books, but they made graphic novel versions, and that is what like the 1st and 2nd grade crowd, they yearn for the dragons. And so I have been reading this book series with my kids for like the better part of this year. And it's a graphic novel. One of my kids can read, one of them can't yet, right? And graphic novels, great, lots of pictures, but very hard to like indicate who's reading or who's speaking when you're reading it to someone, unless you want to like sit there and point to every single dragon as you read on the page, which I didn't want to do. The end result of this is now I read to my kids every single night this epic long fantasy book series where I am expected to have now a vocal repertoire of 50 to 60 different dragon voices.
You have a cast of dragon characters.
Yes. And so I call it like every night, it's like my voice acting gauntlet challenge of like reading all of these things. But what's really interesting about it, as someone who like, Ellie and I have done like we've done audio fiction musical things.
Okay.
And I had no voice acting training going into that. I still have no voice acting training. I don't think I'm a particularly good voice actor, quite honestly. But what's been really interesting is having to be forced every single night to sit down and go, what else can I even do? And just playing around with like, where can you put your voice? How do I change from this dragon to that dragon? What makes this person sound different from that person? And sometimes like it is wild the amount of stuff that like their little ears will pick up on, in terms of like just really small, simple things and how you could, and I think it was the idea of what you were saying with like the little
the sliders,
knobs
the soundboard.
and I was like, that's literally what it feels like some nights as I'm sitting there, where you're just like, these 2 people have the exact same voice in almost every respect.
Yep.
But one of them's a little tighter and one of them's a little loose, and it's like
you got
versus other things that you're changing around all the time. And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds very relatable.
Yeah, you're like unconsciously doing our curriculum, if you will. We have like a D&D, we have D&D groups, and we have a workshop where we have people try on the new voice skills they're learning to create their like D&D character voice, and they're extremely fun. So that would be wonderful if you had access to one of those. Yeah, there's so we teach people like the soundboard for their speaking voice, but then for every single one of those 5 pillars, there's like the super far ends of the spectrum, and if you hit the really far ends of the spectrum, that's where we find characters. For example, like one of them is called, so resonance, for example. Resonance is like how bright or dark your voice is. It is the most impactful part of voice training. It's like the number one thing that you are unconsciously tuning into, that you just like perceive gender in a voice. So it is, of course, the most important part of voice training. So for example, resonance exists on a spectrum from dark to bright, and it's really controlled by like how big or small your vocal tract is. So if you put your hand on your throat and just say E, can you feel the vibration? So that's where sound's created. Yay. Now that sound moves up from that point that you're touching right in the middle of your throat, up through your throat, your mouth, your nose, and out into the world. The size and shape of that tube that it's traveling through controls the resonance. So we can make that tube bigger and it'll sound darker, or we can make it smaller and it'll sound brighter. So I'm going to show you that first, and then I'm going to show you the characters of it. So basically, let's say I'm going to make the tube bigger. So E, here I've made it longer. So I haven't changed anything else about my voice. The only thing I've done is make the tube longer. Now I'm going to make it wider. E, so here it's even wider. I haven't changed my pitch or anything else about my voice. Everything else is the same. I've just made my resonance darker. Now if I want to push this into a character, E, Monday, Tuesday. So here it sounds a little more hollow.
A podcast is the perfect medium for this. I just want to say that.
I love that. Yep. And then if we go the other direction, so E. So here I've made the tube a little bit shorter, and I'm going to make it more narrow. E, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. This is probably the ceiling of like what could still pass as natural in my voice. Like it doesn't really push character-y if you've just met me like this. And then if I really push it, E, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So now we get really character-y. So it's like you have your typical range, but the best part about voice transition is you also develop all of the same level of control that professional singers and voice actors have. So people often go on to be like, well, that was fun. Great. Now I can speak differently. I want to go a little bit further. Like, let me explore what is the fun stuff I can do. So then after that, we'll have like character classes, like Monday, Tuesday, like doing more character-y, like monster-y voices. Which is the fun stuff that happens after the speaking voice. But yeah, I mean, to your very earlier point, the idea that you get to gain control over this thing that you just unconsciously learned how to do. Like we never learned how to consciously walk. Like maybe our parents taught us, but we don't remember that. Or how to like feed ourselves. These are things that just our brain develops. Same with speaking. Like you imitate people around you, a lot of imitation. And often that imitation is of, identities that you don't align with if you aren't, affirmed at a young age or have the opportunity to explore voice training at a young age. And so, it's really exciting. It can feel intimidating, this idea of changing the way that you sound, but it's also like a really fun journey. It's playful, it's loose, it's exciting, it's exploration, it's creative. It doesn't have to be this like really scary, horrible experience. So that's like always our goal, is to help people navigate the dysphoria that naturally comes up by starting to make it more like interactive and playful, so that there's almost this like you can dissociate a little bit from it being your voice and just let it be a voice that you're playing with, and then kind of niche it back into your own experience as well.
I love that so much. We are not done with the party tricks, but let's take a quick break right here, hear from some sponsors. Let's come back and dive right in.
Score more with the college-branded Venmo debit card and earn up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash. Got paid back? With the Venmo debit card, you can instantly access your balance and spend on what you want, like game day snacks, gear, tickets, and more. The more you do, the more cash back you can earn. Plus, there's no monthly fee or minimum balance. Sign up now at venmo.com/collegecard. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. Select schools available. Venmo Stash terms and exclusions apply at venmo.me/stash terms. Max $100 cash back per month.
Protein is now at Starbucks, and it's never tasted so good. You can add protein cold foam to your favorite drink or try one of our new protein lattes or matcha. Try it today at Starbucks.
This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
Planning a wedding shouldn't feel overwhelming. The Knot brings everything together in one place. Vendors who get your vibe, a custom planning checklist, guest list tools, and a free wedding website that syncs with it all. So instead of juggling a dozen apps and spreadsheets, you can actually enjoy getting married. Get started at theknot.com/audio. The Knot. Let's plan your wedding together.
One thing that I was thinking about while you were saying, because you went through the 3 things that affect our voice. No, you went through the 5 parts of the voice, but you said 3 things.
3 influences, 5 pillars.
Yes. Say the 3 influences for me again.
Geographical, environmental, and physical.
Okay, perfect. And here's what I'm also curious about, because I know this is not directly, certainly not related to like gender voice dysphoria things or anything like that, but I'm also curious because one thing that I've always felt is really interesting vocally, again, as someone who I don't actually really have any training in this, is how language factors into that as well. Because like I do also speak French.
Mm-hmm.
And I always feel like my voice is different in French.
It is.
And I'm curious how that also plays in, because some of it obviously just has to do with like the language and like where that sits. But I think also there probably is some part of it where it's like, in that way that our voices are conscious, unconscious things about us, where like I lived there when I was a kid and then moved back and grew up as an adult, primarily speaking English, you know? And so it's like, I feel like my voice I didn't go through the same journey.
Yeah.
Of my voice with both languages. And I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts on that? Now I'm just like asking you stuff because I want to.
No, I have 1,000 answers. No, I have 1,000 answers. I'm like, okay, I have the.
We have time for all of them. Don't even stress.
Well, if we start with trans voice and then kind of go a little bit broader, I think it's going to be super interesting. So we have people from over 20 countries. I mean, the last time we counted, which was a year ago. So it's probably more than that in our program. Our community is like over 100,000 people. And so, of course, there's people where English isn't a primary language or they're multilingual. And so what I mentioned, the 3 influences of the voice, environmental, cultural, and physical, because we take a physical only approach, we're just changing the instrument that's used, but you can take that instrument and play it in whatever language you speak. So the changes that happen, like if somebody wants to brighten and lighten their voice, or they want to darken and deepen it, those changes then translate into whatever other language they speak without having to maybe go through instruction in that language, which is amazing. Now, other languages
does that happen naturally for them? Because mine does not.
Yeah.
Mine do not translate from one to the other. My voice be different.
No, absolutely. So, but if we like darkened your whole voice, they would still sound different, but they would both sound darker, the same degree of darker. Now, of course, the different languages sound different because they use different vowel shapes and different consonant sounds. Like in French, there's a lot of glottals. It's a lot of this like glottal in the back,
well, and
like hairball.
Even where your vowels sit is farther back. Like it's why it's always so fun when I'm trying, because it's like, you know, working with, like my wife is practicing learning French and all this stuff. And it's like, it's a very common thing when you're talking to English speakers that it's hard to get them to understand that it's like your ooh is not an ooh in French. It's ooh. It's back. It's like, I'm like, no, it's back there. You gotta shove it back. It's farther back, you know, and it's a very different space to sit in.
Vowels are the biggest change between languages. And there's a schematic called the vowel quadrilateral, which shows you basically like a
I
side.
love when we get nerdy. This is my jam.
It's like a side view of the mouth. Think of it like that, and it shows you where in the mouth the tongue is positioned for every vowel. And so basically, your articulators are the parts of your mouth and your voice that change to make different shapes, vowel shapes. So you have your lips. So for like an ooh sound, they're rounded, right? Ooh. Whereas for an E sound, they're pulled back. E. And you can hear even in that, the ooh is darker than the E. So ooh, e, ooh. If you move back and forth between them, that's shaping like a darker, brighter sound. So that's one piece of it, is where the vowels placed, exactly what you're saying. So if you all of a sudden, like English has a lot brighter vowels, whereas French has darker vowels. So if you start shifting from English to French, your French is going to sound a bit darker because you're using darker vowels. Now, if you transition your voice and you want a brighter voice, what happens is we teach you to use brighter vowels in whatever language you're speaking. So we don't overtly rewrite your whole brain on how to like make all different vowel sounds, but maybe I mean, yes.
Can you rewrite our brains?
Yes. I mean, absolutely. That's literally what is happening in voice training. But we might instead brighten that sound by raising shortening the tube instead of changing the vowel. This is getting super technical, but there's 3 levers for resonance in the voice. Only one of them impacts how you shape a vowel. So you can still have 2 of them. You can still have a lot of like more affirming range shifting happening by just changing the 3rd lever, which does not impact the vowel sound. I mean, we got super in the weeds on that, or pretty technical. But if we zoom back out, let me ask you a question. How old were you when you learned French?
We moved there when I was 3. So I was little. So
there's this related, but this is where it's fun to see kind of both worlds collide. This related like phenomenon that will happen. So people who learn a 2nd or 3rd or 4th language before puberty, we call it this like window of acquisition. So there's this period from birth until about 10 years old, where if you learn another language or multiple languages, your brain has enough blank space that it can create 2 separate spaces, like 2 separate neurological areas, one for each of the languages. And that means that you actually have the ability to speak those languages similar to a native speaker. If you instead maybe grow up in the US where you aren't really exposed typically to another language class until maybe high school, junior high if you're lucky, you can absolutely still learn fluency in another language, but it's going to be after that window of acquisition has closed. And that means the 2nd language can still be as accessible, but it's built on top of your primary language. And I'm talking physically, like it's borrowing some space from the primary language. The way this was discovered is they had patients who later in life had a stroke, and they were primary English speakers. Maybe they learned Spanish or another language when they were young, and they either immigrated here, they never spoke that language again after 9, 10, 11 years old. But all of a sudden, their brain, because that when they learned it when they were young and it existed in 2 separate places, when they had a stroke, it damaged one of those places. And let's say it was English, their brain was able to rewire. And now all of a sudden they are fluent in a language they haven't spoken in 20, 30, 40 years because it's a whole separate area of the brain.
That's crazy. I'm sure you know all of this too, but this is reminding me of when they've done, I just remember reading something when I took sign language classes about how also like learning how differently languages mapped in the brains of people who grew up signing. And how it's like different things where they might be same thing. Like if you've had a stroke or something, like people who sign, which is a very locational, like spatial language when you're signing, like there's a lot of, you'll like reference areas in space in front of you as you're talking, where they're like someone might be able to have a perfectly normal sign like language in ASL, like none of that is affected, none of their motor control is affected, none of their recollection of like the signs for words is affected, but they can only do it in one half of the space all of a sudden. And things like that. Like brains are just fascinating.
They're so fascinating.
Brains are so cool.
You know what you said earlier about this idea of like people who grow up singing and getting specific instruction singing have more knowledge of or control over their vocal instrument. We'll have people come into our program and be like, I'm a professional singer and I cannot fucking figure out this voice thing. Like I cannot figure out why I'm so adept and like great at controlling my voice in different, what I'm singing, different genres, etc., or parts of my range. But when I start speaking, it's not translating. And that is because speaking and singing are controlled by completely different hemispheres of your brain. So speaking happens in your left hemisphere, singing happens in the right hemisphere. And unless you intentionally like connect the two of them, a lot of times the skill that you have and the rate and rhythm and control from singing does not auto translate to your speaking voice. And so that's why like people will come in and be confused, or vice versa. You have so much control of your speaking voice, but it is not happening in your singing voice. It takes actual like overt techniques that were specifically created to bridge those two, because the instrument is strong. The instrument, it just needs to be tapped into differently. And so that's what you're saying there about like people who speak ASL or who sign having the different parts. It's called a homunculus. Get really nerdy here. A homunculus is basically this diagram that will show your motor cortex and how much of your motor cortex, the part of your brain that controls motor movement, is dedicated to each part of your body. For example, like the shoulder maybe has like a tiny minuscule little representation where the hands are huge because we have so much fine motor control with our hands. If you look up a picture of a homunculus, it's homuncus. Yeah. For those of you who are listening, are like, well, what is this word? For people who speak ASL, like the parts of your motor cortex that typically go to hearing and speaking are not being used in the same way, utilized. So then that area gets used up by something else.
It's funny how many of these things kind of like all it touches on so many things, you know? And I just think brains are cool and voices are cool and you can do such cool stuff with them.
I agree.
I'm curious because I know I'm like, part of me just wants to just nerd out for like another hour. But I'm curious, like you mentioned at the top, part of how you do that whole retraining of like the unconscious, you know, so that it doesn't have to be a thing that you think about all the time. And I want to hear a bit about how that works while we're getting into all the brain stuff, you know.
So there's basically, you have like a top down or a bottom up approach to most things. And especially whenever you're trying to change something that is as ingrained of a habit and that you don't unconsciously, as ingrained of an unconscious habit is how you speak. And so we use what's called the bottom up approach, which essentially means that people will follow this hierarchy of complexity. So let's take one of the pillars, for example. Let's say I'm trying to teach you how to remove some of the bass from your voice. And so we're going to thin it out. We want to have a lighter sound. So for me, that might sound like going from E to E, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Same voice I was speaking in, I've just lightened it a bit. I've taken some of the bass out. I can do this when I'm speaking fluently because I've done a bunch of voice training, but most people struggle to hit that sound and then maintain it when they're speaking, because your brain just takes over and all of your other vocal patterns just like, you know, kick back in. So in order to actually change that permanently in a way that you don't have to think about and that doesn't require effort in the future, you want to start really simple. So we start with just vowels. So we teach people to thin that sound out, just doing e, ha, oo. So you find a thin sound just doing vowels. And then once you feel like you have that pretty consistently, then you move up in complexity. So then we rewrite it at the vowel level. Then we move to words, phrases, sentences, reading, speaking to yourself, having a conversation, longer conversations. The idea here is that you're trying to hit like every level of sophistication or complexity in language and speech and integrate a new setting for that specific skill or that specific sound at every level. That is a top or a bottom up approach, and it is by far the most effective. It feels tedious at first, but the overarching length of time, we can shift your entire voice in 6 months, 4 to 6 months. Whereas if you do the top down approach, you might be able to find a sound that you like. Like you can all of a sudden start speaking a little bit differently. Like you can shift something about your voice. But in order for that to be a default unconscious habit that just happens when you speak, it's going to take a really long time doing the top down approach. So the way that so that's the hierarchy that we're using, the complexity hierarchy of like, what are you actually training at what level? Now we do that within every single one of our pillars. You have 5 pillars. And so for each one, you move through that hierarchy. And when you get to the point where we have people rank on like a 1 to 10, how much effort it takes to do something. And so we expect when people are starting to learn a new skill, let's take that thinner voice, for example, taking the bass out of the voice, that it's going to take like a 10 out of 10 conscious effort. You have to think about it pretty hard to keep it. And it might even feel like an 8, 9, or 10 out of 10 physical effort to keep that maintained. Now, once that number gets down to like a 2 or a 3, then we move to the next level of complexity. And then when you're at the highest level and it's effortless mentally and physically, then we move on to the next pillar.
And then you've just rewired someone's brain casually in a few months. NED.
And right here, we usually get the question is like, well, I'm not out everywhere. Like I might be socially transitioned with some people, but I still need to be able to, go south in some places, or like if I go home, like I have a shitty family, they're not accepting, or at work, what have you. So the thing I really want to highlight here is we are changing a habit, but we are not restricting your ability to access anything you had before. We are only expanding range. So we talk about it like home bases. So right now, whatever happens, Leigh, when you open your mouth to speak, that is your reflexive sound. It is just a reflex for you. And that is a very strong home base. Now, if you start like building different skills and a different sound and practicing it more and more and more, that one becomes your new home base, meaning it becomes the reflex. You can still find the other sound. You just have to choose it. Similar to whenever you speak French, right? If you're in France for a long time and you're speaking it every single day for like months and months, it's probably going to be the default that comes out when you speak. And then you have to choose to switch into English. So you don't lose anything. You just have to make a conscious choice which one to push into.
Or when I'm voicing multiple dragons with different personalities.
I'm wondering if part of this, you can record that and then play it as like a behind the scenes. You should put that
me
into
doing
this.
The voices for these dragons. Oh, that's so funny.
It's interesting because you being a parent of 2 kids, I'm sure you could probably relate to this, but that is one of the top things that like trans and gender diverse parents will mourn or grieve. This idea of like not being able to freely, comfortably do voices in children's books to their kids without it feeling uncomfortable. And it was a surprise. I'm not a parent, so it makes sense, but also we started to see it as a pattern of a lot of people saying, what's your favorite thing to do with your voice, or what goals do you have once your voice is transitioned? This topic came up so much, which is big part of why we started to use characters as the way in, because that it's like such a really large part. I mean, even if you don't have kids and you're not reading books, like I have a dog, I'm constantly going into whatever voice I use with my puppy, like constantly. But it's like even those small things where your voice is consistently used, that for most of us can feel like fun and exciting, but can cause immense like frustration or grief. For people who aren't.
Well, and I'm also curious just because, we talked a little bit about age in terms of the difference it makes with learning languages, obviously. I'm also curious, like you mentioned working with kids, is that something that you get to do, and how much of a change does it make for kids because I feel like same thing, like as you're, growing into the voice that you're gonna have, like have you gotten the chance to work with kids who are learning how to like land in the voice that they want to have and develop the voice that they want to have, and how cool is that to get to see?
It's like, really fun
process.
The youngest person in our program right now is 9, but we have in our full program is 9, but we have a like free trans voice intro program called Jumpstart, and we have youth only cohorts. And so we've had people as young as 6 go through that, because
that's so cool.
We always think about like the voice doesn't start to change until adolescent puberty, which might be like 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. But remember, there's 3 influences. Puberty only changes the physical part. The environmental and cultural influences on the voice start to kind of create this delineation at age 6 for young kids, that their voices start to change differently and auto-categorize into these like different perceptions of gender as young as 6. So if somebody's voice is starting to move in a way that doesn't affirm or align with their identity and who they know themselves to be, it happens pretty young. And like everything else gender related or gender affirming related, the earlier that you can catch those things, the better. 1, you're not undoing years and years and years of habits. 2, even if somebody doesn't do anything to impact or stop or change that physical development of the voice, learning how to have flexibility and control the muscles really young makes it so much easier in the long run.
To like work on that.
Absolutely. Because a big part of it is like, let's say you're transitioning your voice at 30 years old. You're still like, there hasn't been, you're not that old. Like, trust me, I'm over that age, but it's still, you don't have it. The biggest undertaking is building up the strength and agility of those muscles. And it takes the longest. If you start that at a younger age, amazing. Not to mention, voice dysphoria has a huge impact on mental health. And with the suicidality rates in our community, especially for trans youth, being what they are, which is insane, if you can give somebody a non-invasive, non-clinical pathway to have some gender euphoria and have some alignment and joy, it goes a really far way to combat a lot of those negative mental health impacts that can happen in trans youth. And voice is like the perfect pathway for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I'm going to say the words small and simple, and it's not either of those things, but it's in the way that I think, again,
easy.
like, in terms of like how malleable it
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
for the impact that
Mhm.
it carries, you know, is
Absolutely.
like massive. I mean, it's crazy. So, that's so cool.
We also have like a 90-year-old in our program,
Wow.
right? Those people who like, they did not grow up in a time where transitioning was even an option for them
Yeah.
in any sort of, you know, in a broadly accessible way. And so, you know, it's like that is its own journey, and also such like a touching, moving, beautiful thing to see, like a 90-year-old woman for the first time be able to live as herself. And
Yeah.
I mean, our oldest member is Scottish, and so I don't understand a lot of her accent sometimes, and like a very, you know, strong brogue, which is beautiful. But there's, it's like the whole lifespan, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're not working with like 2, 3, and 4-year-olds, of course, but there's so much beauty because our program is community driven. It means there's thousands of people on one platform every day working with one another, and you get to intergenerationally see people working on their voice at all different points. So just that representation of like a 12-year-old seeing a 30, a 40, a 60, a 90-year-old who are also exploring their identity and have full, rich, lovely lives is also like a beautiful connection point as well. Yeah.
I love this. I would love to sit here and nerd out for another hour. Ellie's gonna be so mad she missed this, truthfully.
We'll do a part 2.
Well, I mean, honestly, we truly could and should and might. But any last words you want to say to our listeners before we head into our Q and Gay section?
Oh, Q and Gay. I love this. What did you call the episode 2? Gay Your Voice?
Gaze your voice.
Gaze
We're
your
just gonna
voice.
Gaze your voice. Get it? Get it? Get it?
I do. I love her.
We decided early on the vibe of at least our episode titles and a lot of our section names. We called it like Gay Blues Clues.
Oh my God!
It's just like the world's worst puns, and they're so dumb and they bring us joy. So, any last messages before our Q and Gay?
I mean, if you're somebody who is listening to this and you're interested in your own voice journey, or you love somebody or know somebody who is looking for, you know, who might be experiencing this as well, our strongest value is to get as many free resources into the hands of our community as we can, especially right now where the world is not a safe or fun place for our community members to exist, and access to gender affirming care is rapidly disappearing or being threatened across our country. So we launched the year before last a free intro program called Jumpstart. It's 3 weeks long, completely virtual. You get to be on our platform for like 2 months as well. And it really helps people figure out like what is possible with their voice, what goals should they set, how do they do it in a healthy way, what are beginner exercises, and all of those 5 pillars. And at the end of it, we give people a whole roadmap for how to continue their voice training. And if they want to continue that with us, we underwrite a $1,000 tuition grant for every participant. And that is, we ran it 20 times last year. We're running it 65 times this year. And if this is released, when I think it is, registration's actually open right now for our next cohort. So if voice training is something you've ever thought about, please feel free to join us. It's undeadvoice.com/join jumpstart.
Love that.
Little plug.
No, please. We will give you, we will plug more. Don't worry. So our Q and Gay.
Q and Gay.
Are you ready?
Mm-hmm. Lay it on me. Gay it on me.
Okay, starting with Gay it on you. Starting with, you get the vibe. Question 1, how do you feel about your own voice? A, I love it. B, it's fine. Or C, I wish it were different.
I love it. I love it.
You've probably got yours locked in right where you want it.
I was for sure told growing up that I talk too fast and that I'm too loud. And
No,
now
you know
I'm
what
proud
I'm
about
excited
those things.
for is like I know many of our listeners, like some of our friends who listen to this and tend to listen at like 1.5 or 2x speed, and I am so psyched to hear their review of this episode with you and I.
Yeah, because
with
we're
you
both
and I,
fast.
just
fast
yeah, we are
speakers.
both fast speakers. So
Well, we were doing that
R.I.P. to
mirroring.
you, Durr. Good luck. Okay.
We're doing that mirroring, right? Like I'm going
Yes.
faster because you are, and then we both are.
Excellent. And somewhere we will just run right off the tracks. Okay, question 2. Have you ever taken vocal lessons? Yes or no?
I have. My most memorable voice teacher is a phenomenal woman named Amy Leonard, who lives in London, but is from the northern coast of Scotland. And the first song I ever learned to sing with her was River by Bishop Briggs. And it was lofty, but I loved it.
And you're going to send us a recording of that to also just drop at the end of this episode.
It's now my shower song, so maybe I'll share my address and you can stand outside the window, any listeners.
I think we live nearby, so I might. Okay, question 3. What is the sexiest sounding part of your vocal cord vocal box? Out of A, vocal folds, B, glottis, C, tongue, or D, trachea?
Well, your trachea is your airway, so I think you mean larynx.
I had to just look up parts of our throat while we were doing this. I didn't have time to get super specific.
Well, okay. Do you want to know what I think mine is?
Yes, you can also fully write an answer.
No, I'm going to tell you. So there's this feature you can do called like forward resonance, which is not great for transitioning your voice, but it gives you like this sultry sound. For example, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So you can kind of slip into a little bit of forward resonance. And that is using my vocal folds. Or vocal cords. I don't know which word you use. They're the same thing. But yes.
Vocal folds, it sounds more like you might find it in a romance novel description of something. Folds is a word that gets thrown around.
Especially if you're thinking trachea, throat, then that one also gets thrown around.
Licking her hot vocal folds. Like you do.
Licking her voice box.
Yeah, that's the trashy romance part I want to read. Okay, question 4. Where would you most make use of voice training? Out of A, singing, B, gender care, C, voice acting, or D, D&D?
This is again me. Where would I?
We're asking you, yes.
Yeah, I know.
You can answer in character if you really need to.
I'm thinking, where do people most get it? But where do I?
The people will answer as well. Don't worry.
You know, when I said that your voice and your speaking and singing voice are controlled in different areas, that is so true. When I start singing in the car, I'm like, God, I suck. It's like, what? Why do I feel so tight? Why does this hurt?
We will be the judge of that when you get us that recording.
I'm like, bitch, remember, lower your larynx, open your throat. I'm like, oh, yes, I can control these things. So I think I make most use of it. And it was singing, speaking, D&D.
Singing, gender care, voice acting, D&D.
Gender care is definitely where I use my voice the most, but the most fun, this is a little bit of a pop out, but my partner is a sound designer for video games, and I often get to do some of the temp audio, or don't tell anybody, even though this is a podcast, during COVID. Nice. They didn't have access to voice actors because anyway, I had to do some like monster scary voice sounds and acting things as temp audio. That was so fun. So that would be my favorite, but it's not my most common.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, and question 5, last question, very important. Who has the most attractive voice out of these choices that are definitely not influenced by me trying to think of voices I think are attractive? A, Cate Blanchett, B, Florence Pugh, C, Jamie Clayton, or D, Jodie Foster?
Oh my gosh, these are all great.
They're good voices, right?
Yeah. Jodie Foster's is just so classic. I would say Cate Blanchett.
There you go. There's no wrong answer.
Was my crush, so they kind of go together.
Incredible. Remember,
can you tell me, actually? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Can you tell me yours? Since you made those 4 up, who has the sexiest voice to you?
I love all of them.
Okay.
I don't know that I could pick, quite honestly.
Okay.
I think they're all good.
Or any in your spank bank? Like you just put an audio of them on?
Yeah. That's all I do. I just play recordings
audios
of all 4 of the. It's actually all 4 of them layered on top of each other.
I'll do that for
I
you.
got a weird system, you know? Remember, listeners, you can give us your own answers to this episode's cute and gay questions on our Instagram at Lez Hang Out Pod. This has been such a blast. We may or may not be having you back on because I'm having a great time. But let our listeners know in the meantime, where can they find you? Where can they find Undead Voice on all of the things?
Okay, so our website's undeadvoice.com. That free program, undeadvoice.com/join jumpstart. Our full program, undeadvoice.com/membership. And then if you are part of like an organization, LGBTQ community center, healthcare clinic, employer, etc., we primarily share about our resources by partnering with other organizations that care about and support trans voices. Partnership is free and we love partners. So that would be undeadvoice.com/partnership. Socials were a little tricky. So we're at undead.voice on most things. Yes.
Good.
Remember the dot, because I don't want to talk about what happens if you leave it out. It's not us, I promise.
Challenge accepted.
I love it.
Incredible. Well, Nicole, look up Undead Voice, and this has been the best time.
So fun.
We love hearing from all of you. We love continuing to build this community. So we just want to shout out some of our favorite things every episode. And this week, listen, I know you all have to thank me personally for making Bridgerton gay, but we would like to shout out one of our listeners on Instagram at Zoom and Rainbow, who was the first to notify us about this trailer dropping immediately.
The gays are coming.
This was Paul Revere with a lamp in the darkness, and that lamp was a trailer for
the next season of Bridgerton.
So thank you all for keeping us apprised of the gay goings on. It's so important to make sure that we are, we know everything that's happening in the gay far reaches of the universe.
Thank you. Thank you for your service. As always, I want to thank our Lesbian Jesus patrons, Mark Foster,
Lizette Stye,
Adi Benitez,
Sophia Phillips,
and Armani Gucci.
And our King Princess patrons, Amy and Ellen.
And Andrea Doucette, thank you so much for supporting us. We could not continue to make the show without you.
Remember, you can also find us on all social medias. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky, and TikTok at Lez Hang Out Pod.
You can email us at lezhangoutpod@gmail.com.
You can check out our website at lezhangoutpod.com.
Whatever app you use for podcasts, make sure you subscribe so you'll be the first to know when new episodes drop.
We also have videos going up on our YouTube channel. You can subscribe at youtube.com/lezhangoutpod to catch those.
Lez Hang Out is an independently produced show hosted by us with audio production by me. Our production assistant is Kristen Murison, and other podcast shenanigans by Leigh Holmes Foster.
If you want to help support the show, the first thing you can do is leave us a rating and a review on whatever app you use to listen to podcasts. It helps new people find the show.
If you want to support us on Patreon and join our Patreon-only Discord chat, listen to bonus episodes on the mysterious topic that Leigh was talking about at the beginning of the episode, you can listen to that at bit.ly/LezPatreon.
If you want to pick up any Lez Hang Out merch, we have all of our designs up in our news store. You can find it on our website or at bit.ly/LezMerch.
And remember, we have a queer production company making queer podcast musicals with guaranteed happy endings. You can find everywhere at $$beanprod.
You can also check out our website at $beanproductions.com.
You can listen to our first two shows, The Flame and Journey to the Heart, on any podcasting app.
And if you want to help support us in making more musicals, you can join our Patreon at bit.ly/$beanpatreon.
If you want to follow us individually, you can follow me at Ellie Rigida on Instagram and TikTok.
And you can find me on Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok at LSH Foster.
With that, I'm Ellie.
And I'm Leigh.
And let's hang out again soon.
Let's hang out.
The UPS Store is making packing and shipping Easter gifts quicker than ever this year with UPS Air. How quick? Quicker than a walk around the park. Quicker than eating all the Easter candies. Quicker than finding a golden egg that you know is stuffed with cash. When you ship UPS Air at the UPS Store, your items arrive on time or your money back. Guaranteed at no extra cost. Exclusively at the UPS Store US retail locations. Send Easter joy on time at the UPS Store. Visit the upsstore.com/air guarantee for full details. Terms and conditions apply.